Well, greetings everyone. This is Eli the Restorer. Today I wanted to carry on a message that we've talked about in the past. One of the things that I've watched is how often people avoid discomfort, uncomfortability, fear, awkwardness, etc., etc. Last evening I attended a really awesome class at Unity where the pastor there was sharing the work of Byron Katie. What Byron Katie discovered when she was in her 40s and she was really suffering, I think she was stuck in her bedroom for a year before she had this awakening, is that she was believing every thought she was having that would pop up into her consciousness. Now, I've heard of something called a thought field, because the question is, where do our thoughts come from? Byron Katie teaches is we don't know. But I got a hunch that there is a field of thought, kind of like energy waves that just go around and round, and one hits us and one hits you and one hits somebody else, and they just bounce around. I've done a lot of research on brain science, and I don't think some of the things that we believe, like the brain does all this, I think that's pretty much been debunked by people that know anything. It's more about fields of consciousness. So I think it's very possible that there's a field of thoughts that we're like antennas and we just pick up on. For instance, let's say we're having a thought that I'm going to lose my job. Now, your job is very secure. You're really good at your job. There's no visible reason that you can find that you're going to lose your job, but you believe that thought, I'm going to lose my job. And what happens with our beliefs is they create emotions, which create stress, which create actions. I'm a huge Dateline fan on NBC because what Dateline shows you is normal, everyday people that have a thought about something and then they let it become a boogeyman in their life and they end up murdering somebody and spending the rest of their life in jail because they believed the thought that wasn't true. Well, thank God most of us don't have to go that far to end up in jail to finally have an awakening. And so when I was sitting in the class last night watching the work being done on somebody that I knew very well, I was struck by how many thoughts this person had about a family member that she never really challenged. And we all do this in some way or another. My dad doesn't like me, my mom never liked me, my siblings aren't close to me. You know, all this stuff that goes into our heads that we don't investigate or check out. And so if we're not conscious enough to at least call BS on these thoughts, we can really live with a lot of stress and fear, and especially fear, because fear seems like it's increasing on the planet. I'm not a big TV watcher as far as the news and all the craziness that's going on. And it's not because I avoid it. I believe they, whoever they are, is doing this to keep us in fear. But once you're willing to not fall into a trance of fear, we then become very free. And I've talked before, and I want to share this again, that my journey has been, I've done a lot of skydiving, both literally and figuratively. And I'm no different than anybody else. When I'm going to go do things that appear scary in that, I've always been able to evaluate and check my thoughts and challenge them, at least challenge them. See, guys, without being conscious of your mind and how it works, well, it's like we become in prison in our mind. You know, we don't challenge a belief or a thought. We believe it. Oh my God, this is going to happen. I could never do that. When I listened to my intuition back in 1999, and I was told to sell the house I was living in and where I had my practice, that just came out of nowhere. But I don't believe that came out of nowhere. I believe that came out of my true intuitive self. My intuitive self, I call it our internal GPS. So I was fully in touch with that, and I thought, that's interesting. I'm supposed to sell my house. So I went ahead and called my real estate buddy and said, Dave, I've got to sell my house. I just want to put on the market. And I just sat on that for, 3 months, I think. Nothing happened. But I didn't care about nothing happening. I did my part. I put it on the market. And not to bore you with this story, because I know I've talked about it before, But after 3 months, I had 2 people come by. They both wanted it. One gave me the right bid, and the rest is history. So I'd like you today to practice something with me. Be mindful and conscious of all the thoughts that pass by, but which ones you grab. You know, thoughts, they say, are like clouds in the sky, in the background, that are just going by. That's how thoughts work. They just come, they go, they come, they go, and then all of a sudden we're believing them, and then we end up on Dateline. So why don't you start practicing paying attention to the thoughts that haunt us, the thoughts that trigger us. You know, thoughts are not bad in and of themselves. They just come from what I believe is that thought-filled place. And they just pop up, and we notice it, and then they go by. And then we notice another one, they go by. It never ends, does it? One of my favorite mindfulness teachers is Michael Singer. He wrote a wonderful book called The Surrender Experiment. And I highly, highly recommend it because it's a true story of Michael's life that started in his early 20s. And I'm not going to bore you with the whole story, but what he started to do is he would say yes to life. Okay, life offered this to come his way, that to come his way. He was wise enough to understand, even as a young man, he understood nothing. And I think, I don't know if it was Plato or one of those Greek philosophers that said, maybe Socrates, now that I'm thinking of it, a wise man understands, or woman understands, they don't understand anything. They just come and they go. But then there's a different GPS, and I believe that comes from our essence, our soul. In the Jewish tradition, there's a belief that our souls know what they're here to do. The trick is the figuring it out, having the guts to try it, and then living out your soul's essence and purpose. You know, everybody's trying to be like everybody else here. And, you know, that old sayings, we're all like snowflakes. None of them are the same. There's some similarities, but there's a lot of differences too. And if we could start to realize that, and like I worked with a young man yesterday in the office, and I can't mention his name, but he got fired from his job recently. A job he hated, by the way. And I won't tell you what his job was, but, you know, he was just going through the motions. He was eking out a living. And a few months ago, one of his friends talked to him about joining the Army. It really intrigued him, but back in, let's say, 6 months ago, it was just an intriguing thought. Well, all of a sudden he loses his job, and he's young, and his mother had a conversation with him on the way to the office yesterday, and she said to him, "Honey, why don't you think about the Army again?" So I told him I would do him a favor. My brother and I practice applied kinesiology, Dr. Hawkins' work, and we've come up with a system where we can find out how much of your soul's essence will be involved in a certain activity or profession. Like me, working as a therapist for all those years, my soul was involved 99.9%. I could never get that 0.1%. So I did a calibration today for this young man using applied kinesiology with my brother, and it turns out his soul would be totally engaged at 100% if he was in the Army. And I told him when he was sitting there as we were talking, I said, you know, there's not a cell in my body or in my soul that has ever wanted to join the Army. Even when I was younger, when the Vietnam War was happening, it just didn't resonate with me. And I don't knock that. I'm not judging anything with that. It's just not what my soul is here to do. Well, his soul will be fully engaged and active, being involved in the Army and whatever that brings to him. Now, is there going to be some fear? Is there going to be some mind stuff going on? You know, that little chatter that we get in our head? I can't do it. There'll be a war. I'll die. I'll miss my friends. And on and on and on and on it goes. And that's why I encourage you guys, if you've never been involved with Byron Katie's work, to check it out. She's got a wonderful website. It's called thework.com. I think she's in California teaching, and she does a lot of traveling. But her website is full of information, and it's got some videos literally showing the work. Where I'm sitting today on my deck, and all those people going by in their cars with the heavy traffic. We have to wonder and ask ourselves, how many of them are aware of their thoughts? that are keeping them in prison in their life. You know, how many people that I know, and I'm sure you know, that are in relationships, jobs, maybe even some geography that really doesn't resonate with their soul, but they believe that they have to stay here, that they can't get a divorce, they can't make a job change. I was just talking to a young man about his job, and he's been living in this condo complex for 3 years now. He was living up in Illinois, and he really didn't resonate with where he was at. He lived up there for a while, and so he told his work he wanted to come back to the area. And so what this guy said is he stayed there, but instead of suffering and being in an environment that wasn't resonating with him, he just took a risk and told his boss, when there's an opening, I want to come back. He's been back here for 3 years. Oh, I'm seeing a cloud fly by. So, see, that's just like a thought. Another one goes by, and another one. I will be offering at some point this applied kinesiology for you guys to find out, for instance, how much of your soul is involved in the career that you have or the life you have. You can even do this for movies and songs to see how much consciousness is in it. That's what Dr. Hawkins was all involved in, was levels of consciousness. And ideally, we want to stay in the higher levels of peace and enlightenment instead of anger and fear and greed and shame, etc., etc. Those are all lower level consciousness vibrations. But start to pay attention to what you're believing about your life, about your boss, about your neighbor, and then just ask yourself, is it true? And can I know absolutely for sure if it's true? All right, this is Eli signing off. It was good talking to you, and I'll be talking to you real soon about another exciting subject to become more whole. They call me Eli the Restorer because I'm into restoring people to wholeness. God bless.